Hey, y'all know how in churches all across America, we do like HIV testing on Sunday morning in the pulpit, like, to raise awareness. I've always thought, yeah, that's such a great idea. HIV testing, do it in front of everybody, destigmatize it. Yay. Well, we're going to learn today on this episode that might not be the great idea we always thought it was. And this kind of blew me, but stick around because we're going to get into it and hear from somebody who actually lives with HIV. So welcome to How to Stay HIV Free. This is the final installment of our HIV awareness and education series. And our good friend Shawn Torres-Anderson is back with us for another installment of this series. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Christian A. Smith. I'm the host and the heretic of Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality. I'm the pastor and founder of the Faith Community, which is a virtual community of faith. And I'm the author of Breaking All the Rules, an ancient framework for modern faith, which you can get a physical copy, an ebook, or an audiobook now. So just click the link in the show notes if you want to get that. And I want to shout out real quick the Black Religious Roundtable of the Interdenominational Theological Center at Morehouse College in Atlanta for sponsoring this 3-part series. If you've learned something during this series, can you let us know? If you're watching this on YouTube, can you drop it in the comments? If you want to shoot us an email, just shoot us an email at connect@thefaithcommunity.org. We would love to hear from you. Would love to hear your feedback. All right. So if you're listening to this episode right now on a podcast platform and you'd rather watch it, you can now watch visual editions of our episodes on our YouTube page. Just go to the TFC Virtual YouTube page. The link is in the show notes and you can watch this episode instead of just listening to it. 3 quick things and then I'm gonna get out of your way and get into this episode where we also discuss Donald Trump's visit to the Chick-fil-A in Atlanta and the shenanigans that happened while he was there. But first, if you're going to be in Atlanta on Saturday, May 18th, we would love to see you at Neighborhood Church, where we're going to kind of round up this entire 3-part series on HIV awareness and education. That's Saturday, May 18th at 4 p.m. at Neighborhood Church in Atlanta. We're going to have a seminar, a talk back. We're going to have some activities, and we're going to have some HIV resources for people who are in attendance. So again, make plan to meet us there. You'll be able to interact with some of the members of the podcast community. We're going to have a good time together, learning and growing and building beloved community. All right. Now, before you actually listen to this episode, do me a big favor, because again, these HIV episodes are sponsored by a grant. So we need your help on this one. Before you listen to this episode or before you watch it, can you click the link in the show notes that says pre-survey? It'll take 30 to 60 seconds to complete that survey. We just want to get your general understanding of HIV before you listen to this podcast. And then after you get done listening, even if you don't finish the whole episode, whenever you get done listening, if you can take the post survey so that we can have your pre-survey and your post survey, that's going to help us to collect some data to report back for the grant that we got to actually do these episodes. So that will be a really big help. I really appreciate it. Take the pre-survey, take the post survey, enjoy this show. You know what to do. Pull up a chair, light a stick, pour a dram, if you please, as we deconstruct harmful theology and build beloved community one cigar at a time. Let's get to it.
Hurry up.
All right, we're back. Deconstructing harmful theology, building beloved community one cigar at a time. Pamela was just appreciating the part in my head, and Tierney was appreciating it too. Weren't you, Tierney?
That's not what happened.
No.
That's not what happened. Tierney was being grossed out. I was admiring and Tierney was being grossed out.
We'll always start these by having this cackle.
I mean, whatever. We're here.
The lies.
Child.
Yo, we're here. We got Shawn Torres-Anderson back with us to finish out our HIV education and awareness series. And because Shawn is here, and he's been such a blessing to us, we're just going to give him a hand real quick for being here with us.
y'all.
Say hello to the people, if you will, sir.
Hello, people. Again, my name is Shawn Torres-Anderson. I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I'm just so glad to be back with y'all again.
Lovely. We're glad to have you. Looking forward to having this conversation. I'm looking forward to learning because I've learned so much during this series. So I'm really looking forward to that. Before we go any further, though, we got to give you the one rule. AT&T is in the building. Yo, I'm so proud of AT&T for how she held down the last episode. Like, such a wonderful job. I was so proud.
Yes, she did. It was so smooth. And can I
Yes.
say, as somebody who was on the cast as she facilitated, it was a pleasure to have her run the show. Because
Yeah.
not everybody can facilitate. But I felt in the moment like I could trust T, and she proved me right. So shout outs to you, boo.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh,
Shout
make
out.
me blush.
Yeah, now you just got to get a mouse and you're going to be all right. But go ahead and do the one rule.
All right. So the one rule here is that we honor each other's lived experiences. We do not uplift theories over what people have actually lived. Healthy debates are welcome, but kindness is key. If Rich Auntie or Steven were here, they would tell you where your ass would get dragged. Okay, so don't come around here acting like you don't know what's going on.
Don't
do it. The one rule is rooted in greatest commandment theology. It says your love for God is displayed through how you love your neighbor, which is an extension of how you love yourself. Therefore, you can't fully love God if you don't love your neighbor, and you can't fully love your neighbor if you don't love yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much. We live by that. Somebody recently asked me, who they were like, how have you been able to manage having a space that's so open and liberated, but still have some sense of structure and order? And I was like, do you mean like, the way the ministry operates, or do you mean like spiritually or theologically? And they said, like kind of spiritually, theologically, how do you manage that? I said, the one rule. The one rule is how we do it. That grounds everything. So regardless of what faith tradition you come from, I'm going to honor your lived experience. And I expect you to honor mine. And that's how we make it work around here. That's how we do it. I think every organization, every community should be grounded in that rule, that we honor each other's lived experiences. And if other communities not grounded in it, that's what we're going to be grounded in. If ain't nobody else doing it. So let's keep it going. We are talking about HIV prevention on this particular episode. And since we've learned so much today, by way of introduction, tell us, your name, what you're smoking, what you're drinking, if anything. And then what's the most fascinating thing you've recently learned about HIV? And I'll start. Christian, the host and the heretic. I'm having some Appleton Estate rum for this episode, just sipping some rum. I'm not smoking right now. I was at the ER earlier this week because I was having respiratory issues. Georgia pollen is the devil. You know how we talk about the divine is in nature. Nature is the divine. Not pollen. Pollen is the devil. The devil.
You're trying to take you out of here.
Yeah. So I'm not smoking anything this week because I'm still trying to get my lungs back in order. But things are much better. Thank you, everybody who's been checking in on me and praying for me. Everything is doing fine. And then the most fascinating thing I've recently learned about HIV was on the last episode where Tierney was the host. And it's funny because this is just like human anatomy type stuff that I didn't know. The difference between semen and sperm and how HIV is transmitted through sperm, but not semen, I believe. Is that right? So I was like, oh, and for those who don't know, I'm an 80s baby. So my first real interaction with sperm was watching Look Who's Talking. Anybody remember that movie? The opening to Look Who's Talking, where the sperm were, that was my introduction. Tierney has no idea what I'm talking about.
I have no idea what you are talking about.
Tierney was Look Who's Talking.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
And then there's Look Who's Talking too. There's
two, right.
Exactly.
I'm exactly. My watch list.
So yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that HIV is transmitted through sperm and not semen. So that was really cool to learn. So let's keep the introductions going. Shawn, since you are a special guest conversation partner, go ahead, tell us what you're smoking and drinking, if anything, and then what's the most fascinating thing you recently learned about HIV?
So again, my name is Shawn Torres. I'm currently drinking Jameson and Coke. I've been teetering with Jameson a lot lately. So bartender the other day told me to try Jameson apple juice and cranberry juice. So
Okay.
I like Irish whiskey. Not smoking anything because I had a procedure last week. So I'm currently smoking asthma medication. So puff, puff, pass. Respiratory things, I just can't do it. And the most fascinating thing I learned about HIV actually was preparing for this was, and we'll get into it later, but I'll just allude to it, the difference between the efficacy of the two different types of PrEP medications. So, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like we're going to learn some stuff in here. I feel like we really about to learn some stuff. Pamela, the therapist, NFL, talk to us.
So I am Pamela, the therapist. I am currently drinking a mango bubbly water, and I also have some real life water right here that I was drinking earlier before we got started. I am smoking incense, white sage and lavender, amen, and Palo Santo and Florida water. So that's what I'm smoking on this evening, as you can see it floating through my camera.
Wafting.
Come on, word. They mean things. What's the question?
What's the most fascinating thing you learned about HIV?
I think for me, to be honest, it was the first time that we had the conversation with Shawn. And there were some instances in which you pointed out that HIV is not transmittable. And coming into that conversation, I thought regardless, HIV was, you could pass HIV regardless of, the medication, that it was always a possibility, that it's certain that you could pass that to somebody. So I think that was the thing that stood out to me, was like, oh, so you can take this medication and your HIV is not transmittable to another person. So yeah, that's something that I learned in the series.
I picked up some of that from the last episode with Minister Diane. Was it Diane?
Lisa Diane White.
Yes, Lisa Diane White. She was dropping nuggets the whole time.
Man, what? She was taking us out of here.
For real. She had so many like little pithy phrases that were just like hitting so hard. T, what about you? What you smoking and drinking? And what's the most fascinating thing you've learned about HIV recently?
All right. Hello, everyone. Tierney, AT&T. And so I am drinking a mango margarita. I am not smoking anything at the moment. I've been burning lately a combination of sandalwood and sage incense. And so I've been putting different ones in different rooms, and it's been giving me my life. So that's what I've been burning. And then the most fascinating thing that I've learned. So what has really stuck with me is this concept of pink parts. And so thinking about how, pink parts are where HIV is most likely transmitted. And so, just thinking, because we're trying to reduce stigma and shame and all these things. And so some of these examples or like theories that people have about how you can contract HIV have nothing to do with pink parts. And so it's just like, okay, well, you're not talking about anything. You don't know what you're talking about. And so this whole idea of like pink parts and those having to be involved in some way with no barrier method has really just like stuck with me. So, yeah.
Yes. We've learned a lot of great stuff. I really hope everybody has been taking this information in, because it's making us better like neighbors to our siblings who are dealing with HIV in very meaningful ways. Brittany said the most fascinating thing I learned is what Shawn taught us when he was here last time, that HIV has been around longer than we realized. That was a little nugget when you told us how, black folk had it in the 60s, but nobody paid attention. Definitely a little nugget that messed with me a little bit. And then real quick, before we go to the next segment, I got to point out the fact that Celeste said in the comments that, I think it was when I was talking about that pollen and how it tried to get me. Celeste said the devil thought he had me. So I gotta go here real quick.
The enemy thought he had me, but Jesus said I am his, and he is mine. Glory. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Yes.
My fave. Yes.
It's the glory. It's the way she said glory. It's the
glory. Yeah.
Yes.
She meant that.
The enemy thought he had me. Yes. So
ain't it funny how we all know who she talking about when she say the enemy?
Absolutely.
We don't even have to guess. We know who she talking about because we all churchy. We all church kids. We know who the enemy is.
Off top, we already know. So we're excited about going forward in this conversation. Before we get deep into this conversation about HIV prevention, we're going to take a little moment to go to one of our favorite segments, and that is
Reaching for the Stars.
All right, y'all. We got one today. It is election season, and it is wearing me thin.
Jesus.
Oh, Lord. And recently, 45 was in Atlanta, made a stop at Chick-fil-A, and the news was there, and it was all over social media and showed all of these Black people who were just such big fans. And one of them in particular was just like the ringleader and all of this stuff. So Isaac Hayes, I think it's Isaac Hayes Jr., did a video about Trump making the visit to Chick-fil-A. So I want you to hear what Isaac Hayes Jr. had to say. Now, if you're wondering, like, why is Isaac Hayes Jr. a significant character here? So he's a content creator, and Isaac Hayes Jr. has his own social media app, Fanbase. If you're looking to get connected to a Black-owned social media platform, Fanbase is something you should probably take a look at. It's Black-owned, and a lot of people are migrating over there. So that's something to consider. But here's this video, and then we're going to look at the Reaching for the Stars. It's a little bit different today. So here's the video first, and then we'll go further.
Sure did. Much better than Biden did. So I was this is Corporate Radio, this is Spelman, this is Morehouse, this is Morris Brown, and all that. Isn't that great? So I don't care what the media tells you, Mr. Trump. We support you. Okay, 4 p.m. We've been 4 p.m.
Come here, let me give you a hug.
Please do.
This entire scene you see here in the Chick-fil-A in Atlanta, Georgia was staged and faked. The woman talking to Donald Trump's name is Michaela Montgomery, and she is the Blexit Foundation City Director for Atlanta, Georgia. Hold on. So what is Blexit? Blexit is basically a Trump supporter, Black-founded nonprofit by Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum. But who owns Blexit? Hold on. So Blexit is backed by Turning Point USA, a racist conservative nonprofit aimed at Gen Z. But who runs Turning Point USA? Oh, look, the racist asshole Charlie Kirk is behind Turning Point USA, who once said, and I quote, Michelle Obama is among Black women who steal a white person's slot. So what y'all not finna do is play on our faces with chicken and milkshakes, because that's what they think of you guys, Black people, that they can put chicken and milkshakes and Donald Trump in your face with some Black girl who's really working for Charlie Kirk and get y'all to vote. Stop playing with us. We not stupid.
So shout out to Isaac Hayes. The crew is already upset, and I ain't even got to the worst part yet. And just a reminder, we do Reaching for the Stars blind. So if you ever hear long pauses, it's because people are really trying to process what they watching in real time. So that was a video that Isaac Hayes posted, and I posted this Malcolm X quote in the comments, just thinking about how, you always get these Black people who get platformed to make us look terrible, to make us look like we don't love ourselves, as if they represent us. So I posted this Malcolm X quote that says, they'll pay one of us to kill one of us just so they can say it was one of us. And that comment gained a lot of traction. As you can see there, it was liked 1,230 times on that post. Let me give y'all the reaching for the stars, because people started responding to it. And yeah, so somebody said that quote doesn't apply to this situation. Somebody else said the logic here is not the same. All right, that's mild. And if y'all want to jump in and say something about any of these on the way, feel free, because that was the most mild. We're gonna work our way up.
But like, how to? Okay.
First of all, his Instagram name is Grown Man Face. Like, what, sir? Okay, that's all I gotta say about that.
This person said, I don't want my kids going to school with Black people. Joe Biden. What is that?
What?
It was like a retort, a rebuttal to me. Like, well, Joe Biden said he don't want his kids going to school with Black people.
So this is a quote from Joe Biden.
I think that's how they're trying to like frame it.
Listen, the internet got me so confused. This has me so confused. God is not the author of any of it.
I mean,
not the author of confusion. What is happening in this comment section?
The person who said that the logic doesn't make sense. The logic doesn't make sense, right? Like all of the things that y'all are talking about in these comments don't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Oh, there's more though. Listen.
More.
Look into what Mr. X had to say about Zionists.
What does that have to do with what we are talking about?
What does that have to do
Nothing
with
about the
what's
price of
happening
tea in China. Nothing.
We're talking about real time here. That is what we call deflection. Amen, saints. Amen.
And
then, no, let's not pay attention to this. How about you go look up this? No. Can we handle what we're talking about right now?
Stay on topic.
Is it getting worse?
Exactly.
You got one more?
One more. I'm gonna give you
I'm
one
sick
more.
of you.
Because this was the one. Because I actually responded to this person. Because this was like a really deep level of stupid. Okay. So again, I put the Malcolm X quote. They'll pay one of us to kill one of us just so they can say it was one of us. This blundering idiot said, well, Biden wants kids to be gay. So who's killing who?
That's not.
I mean, first of all, kids are
like
gay.
The monkey with the laptop. I'm about to push the whole thing off the table.
And people be
just
gay.
Get out
what
my
they got
face.
to do with Joe Biden?
People being gay since before Biden was born.
Let's be clear.
My goodness. I'm tired.
Part of me wants to think, and I've probably given people too much credit.
Part
of me wants to think that we're not this stupid, but that's a bot or it's a white person in blackface trying to gaslight us. I want to think that. I really want to believe that Black men aren't this stupid, because those are all Black men making them comments. But the dude that said Biden wants kids to be gay, I actually went to his page. He's a real person.
That is unfortunate.
I'm tired, child.
Much credit than they need to. Like,
say that again, Shawn.
I think people give Biden too much credit than they need.
Listen.
There are a lot of things that we could talk about Biden. Like, this is where you decide, or the hill you decide to die on, to talk about Biden.
Biden. Yes.
There are a lot of things we can say about Biden, but that's the hill. Also, the fact that y'all got all the way away from 40, whatever number he was, 45, and went to 46. Like,
y'all lost the plot of the movie. We're not even talking about what we're supposed to be talking about.
That's the thing. It's like people glitch when they encounter nuance. Like their brain glitches. They don't know what to do.
Yep.
It's like I made a. And I ain't really like make a critique of Trump. I've talked about her being platformed like she represents us, making us look bad, and they took that as vote Biden. Like, I didn't say that shit. I didn't tell nobody to vote. I'm talking about what I'm talking about.
You basically said follow the money, and like y'all got lost.
Yeah, somebody didn't have their seatbelt on and they fell out of the car, so they missed it.
Yeah.
And I will say, there are so many of these Blexits, or however you pronounce that, entities everywhere. Because my undergrad institution held an event about a few years ago where Trump was on our HBCU campus.
Get out of here.
And he received an award for criminal justice reform.
No.
And I've been boycotting my undergrad institution since then. Actually, the president was one of the people on like Black Republicans for Trump bullshit. And then once we realized she was one of the like board members, they moved her from the page and erased the whole website. But like these entities exist. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know all of these intricacies were a part of it, because I was dead sure like, what all these niggas in here hugging Trump for?
Because y'all paid them.
Same. That's the same thing I was thinking. What is happening here?
Like, I don't even go to Chick-fil-A, so I wouldn't have seen him anyway. But why are y'all in Chick-fil-A anyway?
Everybody.
When I saw it, I thought to myself, if this don't sound like some scripted theater drama play, I was like, this don't even sound real. Girl, you don't look real. Your costume is crooked. Like, who is she and where is she from? So when I saw the thing about the fact that she was a plant, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because I didn't believe it in the first. It just didn't. She didn't sound believable. Not from Atlanta. She didn't. Had they said she was from somewhere else. Had this taken place somewhere else and she did that, I probably would have believed it. But as somebody who been here their whole life, like, baby, that's not Atlanta. That's a whole Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry wrote that. That thing that she did, he wrote that. Me a couple.
Yeah.
You ooh, shots. Wait. Yikes. Okay, but what I was gonna say is, like, if we pay it, follow the money. If you have ever been in undergrad, or if you remember undergrad, you did a lot of things for t-shirts and free Chick-fil-A sandwiches and free French fries and whatnot. So if somebody told you to pull up to the Chick-fil-A at X amount of time because they was gonna give you a sandwich or a t-shirt, and then next thing you know, Donald Trump there, you like, oh wait, but my t-shirt and my free sandwich though, but I don't want to take this
college student.
So like, we're acting like this isn't all intentional and staged.
Right.
Yeah. And everybody got a price. Some people's price is lower than others.
Yeah.
Because I ain't gonna tell you no lie. They might have been able to get me there for a certain price. How much would they have had to pay you to show up at that Chick-fil-A that day?
To disappear.
Wait,
enough to disappear?
Retire.
Enough to retire?
Yeah.
Enough to retire.
They would have to pay us.
But I need to wear a Pooh Shiesty mask. You can't see my face.
Baby, I need
photographic evidence.
None.
I need to be dressed like Meryl Streep. I'm gonna need some Mrs. Doubtfire type makeup, okay? I'm going as a white woman with a little bit of a tan if I'm gonna do that.
They go like,
I'm gonna look racially ambiguous if I'm gonna go do some junk like that.
Baby, am I allowed to say that? Remember that joke I told you about Mrs. Doubtfire? Am I allowed to say that? Is that inappropriate?
If you have to ask, you probably should just not. That's not.
All right.
Thank you. Play it.
I met him last week. FYI, I met him last week. My life was brand new.
Yeah, Shawn, that was so good. That was so good. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That's never gonna get old.
Never.
Ever.
It's so good. You
So-
say you met him, Shawn?
At a funeral last week.
Oh my Lord. Well,
At a funeral.
God bless the dead.
He was playing the organ, and I was like, I know
You
him.
shot a bow. You shot a bow from Holy Smokes.
Honey baked ham.
You honey baked ham from Holy Smokes.
So to the bots and black men, I think it was bots and black men who were in there, who were clearly just allergic to nuance and just assume that if you critique one thing, you must support the exact opposite. We want you to know that you, my friends, have been
Reaching for the stars.
I told y'all I was some foolishness. Didn't I tell y'all I was some foolishness? I did.
You did. You
Yeah.
did.
I told y'all some foolishness. So
Yeah.
let's get into this conversation. We have learned so much about HIV. Shawn came the first episode and debunked some myths for us. And then the last episode, T hosted and Minister Lisa Diane White. I got the name right. It's the y'all these three name people. Y'all be
Blame my husband. Blame my husband.
I remember back in my day.
yeah had two names.
Had two names.
First and the last. We talked about how people actually contract HIV. So today we're gonna talk a little bit about prevention, and Shawn is gonna help us with this because growing up, like it wasn't no prevention for HIV. Like you just better stay away from anybody who might potentially have it. Like don't even breathe the same air, or you might get it. And so much has changed, but unfortunately, in many of our communities, it became taboo to even talk about it. So we just put it under the rug back in the 90s and never revisited the conversation. So we're going to talk today about like, how do we actually engage this conversation about prevention? And I want Shawn to get us going because there are, two things at play here that we're going to talk about tonight: PrEP and PEP. So Shawn, can you tell us like what's PrEP and PEP?
Yes. So again, thank y'all for having me. I think this is a really important conversation. To your point, PrEP is only 12 years old. Like that's all. It was approved by the FDA in 2012, but did not become accessible until more recently. So like 2016, 17 era, right? So there's 5 years of like Black folks not having access to PrEP, right?
The first time I heard about it was a white dude. A white dude told me about it the first time I heard it.
And that's some of the misconceptions that we're going to get into a little later, because PrEP was marketed for white gay men, and then gay men in general. PrEP, there is still no intentional campaign to engage people who are not gay men around PrEP, and no research to suggest that people who own a vagina are protected in certain of the medications, right? So we'll get into all of that because again, all of it is racial. All of it. There's always racial and gender undertones to all of this, right? But so to your question, PrEP, and so I'm a nerd a little bit. So do y'all know the difference between an acronym and an abbreviation?
An acronym?
Yes.
Yes.
I feel like I do.
Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I feel like an acronym are a set of letters that start a word and they all have a word to go after them. An abbreviation is a shortened version of an actual word, of a word. So that's how I think about it.
Yes, but an acronym forms a new word. So like the CDC is not an acronym. The CDC is an abbreviation because a new word is not formed because we're saying the letters, right? So like NASA is an acronym because that's a new word. And the reason why that's important because PrEP is an acronym for pre-exposure prophylaxis. So
Teach in here.
P, capital P, lowercase r, capital E, capital P, right? So that's a new word is formed because we're not saying PrEP. That would make it an abbreviation. We're saying PrEP, which makes it an acronym. So an acronym actually makes a new word.
Yes.
Learn something new every day.
Teach.
So
I love that.
We call the faith community TFC. TFC is not an acronym. It's an abbreviation. Oh. Wait a minute. Before we go any further, we gotta... You better teach me something.
Yes.
So, and the reason why I brought that up, because in the field of public health, we use acronym and abbreviations kind of interchangeably, because most of what we talk about is either an acronym or an abbreviation. So like PrEP is an acronym, stand for pre-exposure prophylaxis. So PrEP is a pill that folks can take at its most basic definition, is a daily pill that people can take, to reduce their risk of acquiring HIV, right? So there are two forms of PrEP. There's Truvada, and which was here from the beginning, and then Descovy just recently got approved by the FDA as for PrEP. So Truvada is for folks who have a risk of HIV through sex or injection drug use. Descovy, there's only data to support for folks who have a risk through sex, but not people who own vaginas, right? So for trans men, for cisgender women, Truvada is what we suggest. And I don't usually talk about like one medical pharma over the other, but I think it's important to name, because if women or trans men want PrEP, Descovy is not available to them because but there's no data to support that there's a reduction of HIV transmission for those communities of folks, right? So that's the difference between the two types of PrEP. PrEP reduces chance of acquiring HIV through sex by 99%, with drug use is 74%. And there are reasons why, because when we're thinking about PrEP, it's all about tissues, right? Its efficacy depends on the tissue and the types of behaviors you are engaging in. So if you're a person who engages in receptive anal sex, you only need to take PrEP for 7 days to be fully protected. If you are a person who engages in receptive vaginal sex or drug use, you need to take PrEP for 21 days to be fully protected. Right. Again, it's all about the types of the tissues you own in your body. So I think that is important. And there is no data for protection for folks who engage in who is the insertive partner. So if you are the insertive partner in anal sex or the insertive partner in vaginal sex, there is no data around that. So that's
still real new.
Say it again.
So it's still real new.
It's still real new, right? Just 12 years of what we know. But because we don't have data, and again, it goes back to who PrEP was marketed for. PrEP was not marketed for cisgender men, for cisgender women, for transgender men. It was marketed for, here's the fucked up part, excuse my language.
Oh no.
PrEP was marketed for gay men and trans women, but not for trans women, right? They put both those communities in the same category. So there was no data for transgender women because they identified them as gay men.
Wow.
And that's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Wow. So so real quick.
Wow.
Because you've used some language that I want to just emphasize real quick. Because one of the big conversations we had at TFC in 2023 was about the term cisgender, because that caused a lot of upheaval in the community, because it was one of those conversations that people hadn't really considered. So Shawn has been saying people who own a vagina, right? And that's important because, some people might be like, why can't he just say women? Because there are trans men who own a vagina. So we're acknowledging these different lived experiences and these different identities, because there is a difference between your anatomy and your gender. And if you're still working to understand that and figure it out, I understand. It took me a long time too. I promise you, I had to become trans inclusive before I understood the intricacies of their lived experiences. Because I used to talk to Pamela about it all the time. Like, Pamela, I don't understand this shit. I really don't know what's going on. It makes no sense to me. And she was like, well, why does it have to make sense to you? And I sat with that, right? And it was like, yeah, it doesn't, right? So if it doesn't make sense to you, it's cool. It may at some point, but it doesn't have to make sense for you to acknowledge another person's lived experience. If it ain't harming you, then you can acknowledge another person's lived experience. So I just wanted to drop that, because that's one of those issues that we have to talk about, because we at TFC claim to be LGBTQ plus affirming. And too frequently, we leave out the T. We say it, but we don't actually mean the T. So when we say
here?
Yeah. So when we say LGBTQ
Talk
plus
in here, brother pastor.
Yeah, we gotta deal with all of it. And that means if we're going to be affirming of trans people, we need to acknowledge the implications of their identity. We got to acknowledge that in how we do this work. So I wanted to just drop that right there.
Yeah.
And then I also want to did you want to say something, T?
So I wanted to ask a question.
Nah, but seriously, level with me. Why haven't you joined Patreon yet? What are you waiting for? You have us in your ear almost every week, and you've been saying you're going to join Patreon for 7 months. If you don't stop playing and go to holysmokesmovement.com and click join our digital community. Nah, but for real, the podcast really is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much stuff that we do in digital community together that you're missing out on, and it has nothing to do with where you live. Our community is spread out all over the world, and the only way this can survive is if those of you who benefit from it actually support it. So we're about to get back to the show, but here's my request. If you love us, support us. That's all I'm asking. Go to holysmokesmovement.com right now and click join our digital community. You can do it right now while you continue listening to this episode. Don't wait unless you're driving. Don't do it while you're driving. But when you get to your destination, don't waste any time and join our digital community.
But it was because when you said
daily.
You said a daily pill, and so you did the air quotes, and I was like, "Ooh, wait, air quotes. What's going on with these air quotes? What's going on?"
I think it's important because with all medication, we know people take medication not necessarily as prescribed, right? Look, I'm supposed to take my asthma medication every day. Some days I'm like, well, I feel good, so I'm not, right? So PrEP is for daily use. But there are other methods of taking PrEP. So like a PrEP on demand. So folks would take is like a 2-1-1 method. You'll take 2, I think 48 hours prior to the engagement, 1 before the engagement, and then 1 after. And that's called PrEP on demand. So people use it that way, but that's not an approved method in the United States, right? It is approved in Europe, and certain health departments give guidance on it, but that's not an FDA approved method in the United States, right? But also folks take PrEP that's not theirs. So if you're taking PrEP that's not yours, you can't take it daily. And that means the person you're borrowing it from is missing their dosage, right? So that's why I put daily, because you're supposed to take PrEP as prescribed, which means you take it that if it was prescribed to you, because there are other implications. Like you don't go to the doctor and be like, I want PrEP and that's it. There's testing that has to be done prior to engaging PrEP, right? You have to get an HIV test, because if you're a person living with HIV, PrEP would not work for you because it used to be a part of the HIV regimen, but it isn't anymore, right? Also, you have to get a bone density test, and then you have to get your liver functions taken into consideration also, right? So when I say daily, because there are implications around the word daily around, it's prescribed to you. You have gone to the doctor to get a script, and you taking it every day consistently and correctly for it to be effective. There is no data to support its efficacy if it's not taken as prescribed. People, and that's not to say that people don't have favorable outcomes for taking it in other ways. It's just not an approved method per the CDC.
Yeah. And Andrea just said in the comments how people lie like crazy to their doctors. I ain't gonna tell you no lie right now. Like it be pressure when you be in there. They start asking you them questions. It's like, so how frequently do you drink? Oh,
Socially.
Yes. I remember my first time going to the doctor, and like when you're a child and your mom in the room, you having sex? No. Getting slutted out all day. No. No, not having sex.
And I also feel like that has a lot to do with culture as Black people going to the doctor and not telling them the truth because of the views and the judgment and the way that judgment and perception affects your care.
Yeah.
And so we've gotten to the place of not telling our physicians, who have primarily been white for most of our lives, my generation, millennials and back, the doctors and the primary care physicians have, for the majority of our lives, been white. And so there has been an over view of judgment and perception and mishandling because of that. Whenever we are forthright with our daily activities, we get prescribed with something or diagnosed with something that we don't necessarily need. And so what we've learned to do is to tell a lie, because I don't want you to put me on this medication. I don't want you to put me in this program. I don't want you to, give me all of these things when you wouldn't give that to somebody else who looked like this, who was my same age with the same situations going on.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing that up, Pamela, because it also brings up what happens in this house stays in this house. So you go to the doctor and they ask you questions and you like, well, my mama told me I can't be talking about what happened in this house.
Right.
So I can't be telling you my business. I can't be telling you how often we drink or none of the other things, because that's not your business. That's my business. Yeah. And so to what you said, it's like multiple layers to that.
Yeah.
Well, we need to break that generational curse.
We need to use wisdom as we go forth with that.
Yeah. I mean, we need to use wisdom, and we also need to be honest with ourselves about what we're doing. I think that's the big part, right?
That's it right there.
If we're going to the doctor and we're telling lies that really will harm us, then that's where the problems really, really come in for real. So Shawn, you told us a little bit about PrEP. Now, what is PEP?
All right. So PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. It's what you take before engaging in the sex act. PEP is post-exposure prophylaxis, right? So at the genesis of PEP, we were talking about OPEP and NPEP. And this is a lot of technical terms. So OPEP was occupational PEP. So PEP was formed for the medical field, right? So say a nurse is drawing blood from someone and gets stuck with a needle, right? So PEP was used as a way of preventing HIV post the exposure. NPEP was non-occupational PrEP. So it's for everybody who's not a doctor. So now it's just PEP, right? So PEP is a medication that you must take 72 hours after the exposure in order to prevent the HIV transmission, right?
Is it like...
Go ahead.
I was about to say, is it like the plan B of HIV?
It is like the plan B. So I've never taken plan B, so I don't know when must you take plan B, after how many hours?
I think it's within 72, isn't it?
Yes,
I think so.
72 hours.
So next day.
It is the plan B.
Conceptually.
It is the plan
Conceptually.
We ain't taking no chances. We going to the drugstore right now.
Right. A 24-hour Walgreens.
right? So that's so even the time frame, right? You can go to the Walgreens and get Plan B. You can't go to the Walgreens and get PEP, right? You still need to go see a medical doctor, or not just a medical doctor, not just a primary care doctor, but you go to like maybe a federally qualified healthcare center or an HIV service organization to get prescribed PEP. But you have to take it before the 72-hour window. And the transmission can come, from sexual intercourse, from sharing needles, or from sexual assault, right? So I think that's important because we only think about HIV or PEP as like in the idea of like consensual sex, right? But it is also available, folks, in those moments of non-consensual sex and sexual assault as well. However, and you must take it for 28 days. It's a 28-day regimen that you take to prevent the transmission. Now, for folks who have a more regular exposure to HIV, PEP will work, but you'll constantly be on a 28-day regimen of PEP when you can just get prescribed PrEP, right? If you know you're going to engage in sexual behaviors that put you at a higher risk for HIV, and I really hate using the term risk because it's only risky for certain communities of folks, right? But I'm going to use it for the sake of this conversation. If you have higher risk, PrEP might be the route for you. And this question, can you get an appointment in 3 days? And the good thing about it is there are so many services that are offering PEP. Some are expensive, right? You can go to the emergency room, but we know my copay for the emergency room is $200. So and I'll be paying it. So they're going to have to come get it unwillingly because I'm not willingly giving you $200.
And that's before you buy the medicine. That's just to go.
Listen here.
No, don't even get me started. I went to the emergency room earlier this week. My bill was $3,200.
Y'all, Jesus paid it all because.
And they came in and said, "Can you pay this today?"
I said,
to him, nope.
Put it on the payment plan, baby.
Thank you.
Y'all can just send me the bill.
Look. But you can go to a variety of places to get PrEP. And somebody asks, are they both equally effective? Yes. PrEP and PEP works. I think at the end of the day, it works. We know that it to be an effective medical intervention to protect against HIV. And I will say that it is at the expense of people living with HIV, right? So for instance, Truvada was a medication that people living with HIV used to be on. When PrEP became available, people who were living with HIV who were on Truvada were all taken off of Truvada.
Why?
Because you couldn't take Truvada by itself. You had to take it with something else. So either Truvada, Rayataz, and Norvir, or some other combination. But the idea was that you have bone density loss, and you liver functions won't operate properly if you take Truvada. But people not living with HIV are taking it for PrEP. So like, what is it? So it is at the expense of people living with HIV, but it is effective. And I will say it is effective. It is effective. It is effective. And I will say, for people who are living with HIV who were on Truvada, or people who live with HIVs, a lot of the conversations I hear are, well, what about us? Like, why did it take so long for this to become something available? I've been living with HIV, the conversations for this amount of years, and there were no medical interventions available for me. So I think that is a lot of the conversations that people living with HIV are having around PrEP, because it is an effective intervention that could have worked, because the drug, the pill, had been available for longer than 12 years. But it wasn't available for PrEP. It was just available for an antiretroviral medication.
Can we give him a hand? Because he is like educating us here. So I already feel a little bit more empowered, right? Like to be able to speak somewhat fluently about the purpose of PrEP and PEP. But like, what can we do as a community to help prevent the spread of HIV? What are some things that we can do? We talked about like taking PrEP, but like just those of us who are supporting people in the community, or those of us who might have exposure to it, what steps can we take to prevent the spread of HIV?
So one thing that we should not be doing is using fear as a tactic to prevent HIV. I think Deirdre said it earlier that that they're selling you on fear, right? And I've been thinking about that concept around fear mongering. Fear mongering or fear never changes behavior. If it did, all of us would be healthy, whole, blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. Fear does not change behavior. And I thought about this. I took my cousin to the doctor, and the therapist came in and kept saying to her, oh, you know, if you don't take your medication, your liver going to die, you're going to die. I said, hold the fuck up. She's 16. She is 16. What you're not going to do is talk to her. I literally stopped her. You're not going to talk to her like that, because that does not translate well for a 16-year-old who has had a new liver since she was 1. So no, we're not doing that. So when her nurse practitioner came in, I asked her, can you explain this to her in a way that is filled with that has care attached to it, right? But all of that to say that if you try to scare folks into taking PrEP or away from certain behaviors, you're not going to curb those behaviors, right? So never use fear as a tactic. That's one. I think other things is to think about those misconceptions we have around PrEP and PEP, right? So PrEP works. And I think the conversation is, oh, you should use PrEP and a condom also. Yes, but not because PrEP is ineffective. PrEP only protects against HIV. PrEP does not protect against other sexually transmitted infections, right? So you can be on PrEP and still transmit chlamydia, gonorrhea, all of those other things, right? So PrEP only works against HIV. So if you're going to say use a condom, and it's not to dismiss the fact that PrEP works, it's because it doesn't protect against other STIs, right? So I think that's important when we're thinking around reducing stigma and reducing shame around drug use. And here's another thing. We, again, only talk about PrEP and PEP through the lens of sex, but there are people who use drugs in our faith communities who use, here's the thing, all of us are drug users, every last one of us, right? But when we're thinking about like morality, there are certain types of drugs you use that are wrong. There's certain types of drugs you use that are right. And that binary thinking never worked. Like, we don't live in binary. So like this idea of right and wrong never worked. So thinking outside of that binary around right and wrong, to think that all of us use drugs, right? If you take insulin, you're a drug user. If you take hormones, you're a drug user. If you take antiretroviral medications, you're a drug user. If you take Tylenol, you're a drug user. If you drink ginger ale and go lay under your blanket to sweat the fever out, you are a drug user, right? So thinking about, so kind of like normalizing the fact that all of us use drugs, and some of us use drugs for different reasons, and others of us use drugs for other reasons. But thinking around that PrEP and PEP are not just for people who engage in sex, but for people who use drugs as well. I think that's another thing. And
when you flip your paper, it's hitting your microphone some kind of way.
Sorry.
No,
I'm just flipping. Another way to reduce our understanding is to think that HIV and PrEP are not just for gay men. And I know marketing would suggest such. It's not just for gay men. PrEP and PEP is for everyone who engages in behaviors that would put them at a higher risk for acquiring HIV. Though there is no data for certain communities of folks, it is still effective, an effective medical intervention. And I think those are ways that we can help reduce those risks for HIV.
Thank you for that. I want to really just like throw out one more question before we go to our close, because the faith community and holy smokes, we're a digital community and we're predominantly Black like we're culturally Black space. And as you have said, there are so many racial nuances to this conversation, even going back to the first time you were with us, telling us how Black people had HIV back in the 60s, but we didn't know to the 80s because, you know, they didn't pay attention to it. So for those of us in the Black community who are like just now kind of catching up on some of this information about HIV, how can we support people in our community who are living with HIV?
That's a really good question. And I've been thinking about that, and I've really been struggling with this. Number one, stop getting tested in your pulpits. Stop that. That shit is whack.
Wow.
There have been some prevention in the pew movements that have cisgender heterosexual pastors get tested in their pulpits as a way of trying to get the faith community to engage in HIV testing. One, they only approach pastors who presumably would test negative. That's one, right? They wouldn't ask me to go up there and get an HIV test. That's one. Two, if that pastor tests positive in the middle of worship, what then happens? What happens? So they target or they are intentional, about who they ask to get tested in front of the congregation. Stop doing that, because there's a faith member, Joseph Reeves, often says that it is, and I wrote it down because I want to say exactly what they said. They said it is performative in ways that are harmful, that are more harmful than good, right? It's a performance. It is a performance, right? And also, there is no clear data that would suggest that Black folks are going to get tested because their pastor got tested. No, there is no data to support that. So that's one thing. I was in my internship for seminary, and they were doing HIV testing, but like in a room that was connected to the sanctuary during worship. And I said to the pastor, I said, what happens? And she was like, oh, I didn't think about that, because you're not engaging people living with HIV into conversations. That's another thing. We need to center folks living with HIV in some of these conversations around, HIV, because there are those lived experiences that are helpful. And as a person living with HIV who saw HIV testing getting done in worship, that is disruptive to me. That's also it's targeting in a way, because it's just targeting, right? Because I saw somebody get tested negative, came out the room smiling, was really happy, really joyful, and shouted during worship because their test result was negative. That is harmful, right? That further pushes stigma and shame, right? So that's one thing that we as folks who are not living with HIV can do. Stop getting tested in your pulpits. Stop getting tested during Sunday mornings. Yeah, I think that's my main thing. But that's my main thing.
Yo, that's wild. Because I would have never thought you would have said that. Because I mean, as someone who doesn't live with HIV, I see that, I be thinking, oh, that's nice. Yay. We're doing HIV awareness in the pulpit. Great. So to hear that from you as someone who lives with HIV, how that comes across to you. And that's a part of understanding people's lived experiences. If I didn't know your lived experience, I would just go along thinking, look, I'm being an advocate, and really I am causing emotional and psychological harm to people. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. Ladies, y'all got anything y'all want to add?
Just say, go ahead, T. No, I was just gonna say what Shawn was talking about just reminds me of the ableism that a lot of us don't know happens in our churches. And this idea of needing to be healed from everything and needing to be delivered from everything. And I feel like because we hang so much of what we believe on Jesus and his acts and his works, it's like there's this thing of being healed and delivered from everything. And so if you happen to have some type of disability, if you happen to have something that you're living with, then we're just going to say that you're healed from that. And like Christian, how we were watching, what was it we were watching? And you were like, so you're just using the fact that somebody has taken their medication and you're saying that they're healed from it, when in all actuality, they've just been compliant with their medication. But you're using this on your platform as an instance to say that this person has been healed. Like, it's just, I just don't like it. I don't like it. It's a ick. It's icky.
Yeah. And thank you for naming that. Cause I remember somebody had said to me oh, my prayer for you is that, God would heal you of HIV, but that's not my prayer for myself. That's not my prayer. My prayer in healing, what healing looks like for me is that everybody has access to affordable healthcare. So that the impacts of HIV doesn't do them in, right? That's what healing looks like for me. Not that God just removes HIV from my body, because that was who was it back in the day? Oh, he doesn't have HIV anymore. Yes, he does. That's not how HIV works. And there was another gospel artist oh, the Lord healed my body from HIV. I don't have HIV anymore. That's not biologically correct.
Yeah.
You are we use it. I can't think of the word right now, but you are
virally suppressed.
Thank you. You are virally suppressed. That's what that is. You can't transmit it, but you're still a person living with HIV. And I think that trying to distance ourselves away from a diagnosis does more harm, because what it does that psychological trauma in other folks. So yeah.
And that's a form of spiritual bypassing too. So if we pray that Jesus heals you, then it removes the responsibility from us to make sure everybody has access.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Jesus will take care of it, when really, if we all advocate for each other, we could be the hands and feet of Jesus to make sure everybody has what they need. Oh, God.
Because a cure is possible. It's possible. But HIV, they make money. They're making money.
Yeah.
They're making money. It is possible, because the same folks who worked on the COVID-19 vaccine were the same folks who were working on the cure for HIV. They were told to stop working on the cure for HIV, work on COVID, and then go back, right? So it's there. A cure is there, but and that's a lot. People, oh, no, the cure, it is possible, but not in the ways that we're thinking, religiously. And that's not to say that Jesus cannot, but that's not how things are set up. I think if there's a cure, then Jesus does it through a cure, right? When we have to be realistic, we have to be honest about that.
And it's not helpful.
No.
Yeah, I think that's the big point right there. It's not helpful. T, did you want to say anything before we wrap up? Because you look irritated as hell.
So I have so many thoughts, and I feel like none of them go together. And so I'm trying to figure out what to do with all of them. So I'm going to share two things, and then I'm going to be quiet. So what Shawn said about pastors being tested in the pulpit reminded me of a conversation that I had with a mentor when I was in undergrad. And so we did HIV testing on campus in our undergrad, and I was trying to go to all the programs that Delta was hosting because I want to be a Delta. Okay. So whatever y'all doing, I would be there because I want to do the things. And so my mentor was a Delta. And so I was like, okay, I want to go support your program. And, they were doing HIV and STI testing. And she was like, do you need to get a test? And I was like, I mean, I don't need a test because I'm not having sex right now. But if you need me to take the test, then I will. And she was like, no, we're not going to waste the test on you when you're not having sex, when there are other people who actually need to take the test and it might actually be beneficial to them. And that's what it feels like when you talk about having these tests in church in real time. It's like, yay, I participated. I did the thing. I get a participation trophy. Woo me. I'm so wonderful. And I think having that conversation with her then really shifted how I think about those types of things. And so it's like, if I know I'm not pre-diabetic or I don't have high sugar, when y'all have these free clinics, why am I wasting your test when I know that my thing is not going to come back needing attention? If you are passing out HIV tests, they should be used for people who are actually at risk for having HIV, not people who know that they are either one, not having sex, or have been doing something that would not put them at a higher risk, right? And so just this self-gratification that we have by feeling like we participated in something, or that we did something, or that we're like good and like sitting into the things, it just really made me think about how, if we're not careful, we can, like Christian said, be more harmful in the thinking that we're doing a good thing instead of the actuality of doing that thing. And so that has been like sitting with me. And then the other thing that's been sitting with me this whole conversation is we talk a lot about medical racism. And what you've been talking about in this conversation is making me think about what medical homophobia and medical transphobia looks like, and what it would look like if somebody did a study and actually like wrote about and talked about those things in an intentional way, in the same way that we talk about medical racism. And I'm just sitting with all those thoughts as they are pondering in my brain. And so, like I said, I don't know that I have anything succinct to say. Those are just the two things that are coming up for me. And I want us to stop being self-aggrandizing, and I want the medical system to stop being racist, homophobic, and transphobic. So,
and predatory.
Yeah.
So I think to that last, there's a book. It's called Medical Apartheid: The Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present. So by Harriet Washington. So I think that book kind of, touches on those things. But to your other point around HIV testing, I think, and this is just my opinion, is not a suggestion to anyone, is that like when folks who are not gay men are offered HIV tests, they should take them, and as a way to normalize HIV testing in other communities. Because what is happening is, so like my mom, she told me she only been tested for HIV 3 times in her entire life. And that's when she was pregnant. And that's it. She'd been pregnant 3 times, but had not been tested for HIV any other times, though had been sexually active, had not even been offered an HIV test, but have been sexually active for, she's in her 50s, for close to 30 years, right? So the last HIV test she had was 28 years ago when my brother was born. So I think there's a way of normalizing HIV testing in other communities. And I don't think that is the only way, but I think we need to think of other ways of how we do that. I think COVID was a good conversation, because everybody was getting tested for COVID. I think, how do we then translate that conversation for HIV testing, though there are different things at play? But I think, to your point, I do think normalizing HIV testing outside of gay men is needed.
I think this is like really, really helpful. Just if I've taken nothing else from this, Shawn, is just the importance of having conversations and listening to people who live with HIV, so that you can understand their perspective and how they see the things that we do when we talk about HIV, or when we engage programming about HIV. And in order for us to do that, we have to have these conversations and open up the dialogue so that people even feel safe to acknowledge that they live with HIV. But when we started talking about this series, that we were going to do this series within TFC and the ecosystem, at least one person acknowledged, like, I live with HIV. They shared that unsolicited because they felt safe to do it. So I just think it's really important for us, as we engage these conversations, to listen to the people who are actually impacted by it to understand how the things we do impact them. And in order to do that, we got to make them feel safe and make them feel safe.
We can learn by what they have lived. Help us in here.
Come on,
Okay.
one rule.
Yeah.
One rule.
Yeah. That's it.
Yes.
That's it. As a matter of fact,
Here's how we praise them down south.
Shawn got his tambourine out. I see it.
So Shawn, can you just give us some closing words, final thoughts as we end this series? What do you want to leave us with as we go up from this place?
Yes. So Deidre and I have been like on one accord all night because the final thought that I wanted to leave with us is everyone can be potentially at risk for HIV, right? When we're thinking about HIV, in the last few years, 50% of all HIV diagnoses have been people 50 and above, which means folks are hunching. Folks are hunching, right? And what we do, and they're called the vulnerable community, because what we do with our elders is we put them and we sit them here. What we do with children is we put them and we sit them here. And we don't have open and honest conversations that engage these two communities, our children and our elders, around things like HIV, around things like medical care, around like all of those things, right? So how do we then, we talk about intergenerational ministry all the time. So we take those two communities off the shelf. And as millennials, we have conversations, we bridge those gaps because our young folks are living with HIV, our older folks are living with HIV, millennials are living with HIV and are not living with HIV. But all of us can benefit from having conversations with all of us around HIV prevention, and then also medical interventions that exist.
Yeah, man. I'm really glad we did this series. I'm really glad we did it. Shout out to the Black Religious Roundtable, the ITC, Interdenominational Theological Center. I gotta slow down whenever I say that because it's so long. For sponsoring this series. Shawn, thank you for blessing us with your insight and helping us to see it from a different perspective, because this has really been profound and impactful. We're gonna come back next time, y'all. We're gonna be right here, deconstructing harmful theology, building beloved community, one cigar at a time. Peace out.
Peace and blue magic hair grease.
All right, so the episode is over. Are there questions that we didn't answer that you were hoping we would discuss? Is there more conversation you'd like to have about this topic? If you made it this far into the episode, the only thing left for you to do is join the Patreon community, because that's where all of that stuff happens. We continue these conversations every day. We have a whole ecosystem of digital communities, like 10 different communities that you can get access to for $10 a month total. And you can watch these recordings on demand. And if you upgrade to a higher tier, you can actually be in the live virtual audience when we record these in real time. You get the pre-show, the after show, you get backstage passes. Go over to holysmokesmovement.com and then click join our digital community. And if you still got questions about how the digital community works, when you go to holysmokesmovement.com, there's a video right there. Watch that video, learn a little bit more, and then come over and holler at us in our digital community. holysmokesmovement.com. Click join our digital community. We'll see you there.